Are you a business owner or employee who needs to network but is terrified of walking into a room full of people you don't know? Are you afraid of being left out of conversations or being awkward in the conversations you do have? Your tour guide, Faithann, is here to walk alongside you through the networking terrain, offering tips and tricks to network with ease. She'll also bring insightful interviews with successful business owners who have used networking to expand their businesses. Building relationships is the heart of networking, and generosity is the cruise ship that will navigate you toward those important relationships for your business or career. Grab your sunscreen and suitcase. Faithann is ready. Are you?
Hello there, and welcome to the Networkers Tour Guide podcast. I'm glad you found the show. Networking is providing opportunities for others that they would not have except for you, so that you have standing to ask for opportunities from people when you need them. How do we create opportunities for others, and how do we ask for those same opportunities? Well, that's what this podcast is all about. It's what I'm here for. Let's dive into episode 30. Welcome, listeners, to this episode of the podcast. I have with me Evonne Barrier from Barrier Consulting. Evonne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Faithann. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and Evonne and I have not known each other that long, but we both are part of a group called OKC Women in Business. And I think that's where we first met in that group. And
I think so.
yeah, and Evonne has a wonderful heart, and she's done some amazing things with her business. So why don't you tell us, Evonne, about what your business is and who you serve?
Sure. So, Barrier Consulting is a virtual assistant agency. We offer more than just virtual assistant services. So, we offer operations support, SOP creation, and virtual assistant placements. I feel like at this day and age, when I started my business, it was 2019, and virtual assistants were becoming a lot more mainstream and a lot more familiar. And then COVID just kind of like launched us into notoriety, and everybody generally knows what a virtual assistant is nowadays. But at this point, I feel like it's become a little bit of a catch-all term, and is really meant to represent virtual support. So at this point, we place different administrative support. So if you need admin help, we have project managers, we have marketing assistants, and then we have bookkeepers as well. So we really serve small businesses and micro businesses, solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, and those are our main clients. I love working with women business owners, but we have a good mix of male and female clients.
Okay. You said something in the very beginning of that I wanted you used an initial, but I want you to tell us what that initial means. SOP. What is that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sorry, industry jargon, right?
Right.
Um, so SOPs stand for Standard Operating Procedures, and it's really I was just explaining this to a team member the other day. You can think of SOPs as your scaffolding around the building that is your business. So, in order for your team to be able to build additional levels, you need the scaffolding for them to stand on to continue to build the walls. And if you don't have that, the SOPs essentially are the scaffolding. So, they're the pieces that are going to communicate to your team exactly what they need to do for the different deliverables and different processes in your business. So it's really important if you want to scale.
Right. I really like the analogy. I like that picture of scaffolding and needing something to stand on in order to grow. That's a really nice visual for the listeners.
Yeah,
So that's a
I was
great.
really excited when I came up with that one.
Yeah. I'm always thinking of analogies. I love analogies. I love to think how to take a difficult concept and bring it down to it's as if you are this and then you have this and put it into something that people are very familiar with so that they can kind of wrap their heads around it. And it can be very daunting for a business owner to have to write standard operating procedures. And it's also difficult for them to understand how necessary they are, right? Because if you start off just doing your own thing, maybe you're a painter and you have enough work for you, but then all of a sudden you hire somebody, and then this is what happens is that painter thinks that the employee thinks just like them and is going to make come to the same conclusions that they are, and it's totally different. You have to be so specific, and you can't assume that other people have your brain inside their head.
I absolutely agree. I'm like nodding empathetically over here, like, yes. That is completely correct. And I think as leaders, like most of us got in our business because we were good at what we do and we have a servant's heart and we want to serve our customers, not necessarily because we wanted to lead a team or we wanted to step
Mhm.
into this role as leader. And I think part of being a good leader is setting our team up for success in the best way we possibly can. And that means giving them the knowledge and giving them the tools that they need to complete the work the way you want them to complete the work. And if we don't set expectations, if we don't have strong communication, and then if you don't have that documentation to give them, then we really can't expect them to do things the way we want them to be done. So, yes, they are so important in the beginning when you are trying to scale or when you're even before you're ready to scale. I
Mhm.
think SOPs are something that you can start as a solopreneur when you are a one person show. And it's essentially just getting that information out of your head and onto paper. There's lots of tools now that make it really easy. And there's lots of little tips and tricks about how you can go about doing that. But that is one of the first pieces you need, which is why I kind of always start the conversation with that. And then we go into who's going to implement those processes, who's going to take those items that are non-income producing activities off of the business owner's plate so they can focus on the income producing activities, whether that's creating the deliverables for the client or actually going out and networking and selling
Mhm.
to new clients.
Right, and I wanna get into networking, but I have to tell you something first. I hired a business coach a few years ago, and I'm excited to, invite her onto the podcast. And, this was during my time with Window Cleaning Plus, when Window Cleaning Plus was my only business, and that's what her role was, to help me figure out how to navigate that. And she's like, "I want you to write down how to clean a window." Can
Hmm.
you imagine how hard that was? So hard for me. Like, what do you mean write down how to clean a window? I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're killing me." But I did. And those things are useful. And I think, like you said, the most useful thing is so that everybody's on the same page. We're not making assumptions, or we're not asking our employees to come to conclusions that they don't have the wherewithal to come to, you know. So,
Absolutely.
okay, so you have a networking story that I am so curious to hear about. And so just dive right in and tell us, the impact that networking has had on your business, and specifically this story.
Okay, absolutely. So, my story around networking is really tied to my story of how I got into business. And so, my background's in restaurants. I worked in restaurants for a decade and managed a small local restaurant in my community in Norman, Oklahoma for I think I was a manager there for about 4 years. That was my first foray into SOPs and, creating duplicatable processes, even though I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time.
Mm,
But when I left the restaurant industry, I was on a search for like, what is my purpose? What do I do? How do I find a career that's fulfilling? And it started with selling life insurance. And that actually introduced me to networking. So, my first foray into networking was when I was a life insurance sales lady, and I got really lucky and ended up being accepted into a BNI group in my it was almost an hour away. So it was up in the city, but I was planning to move to that area. So it kind of made sense. So, for those not familiar with Oklahoma, Norman's a little suburb of Oklahoma City. So, it's about an hour away from where I was living at the time. And that's where I got started into networking. And it introduced me to so many amazing concepts, personal development, like sales concepts, all of this kind of stuff. So, I networked. I was in that BNI group and I was selling life insurance. And then I kind of like tried a couple different things. So decided life insurance wasn't for me. I ended up selling Arbonne for a little while and some health products. And my BNI group was so great. They just let me keep changing my seat because they're like, well, you know us and you're
Right.
still referring us. So like, we'll just learn the new thing you're doing now, I guess.
Right.
Um, so I think I changed my seat 3 times in that group and
Oh,
they
wow.
were so supportive. So when I was selling Arbonne, I was like cleaning houses for a friend and just searching for my purpose. And I ended up stumbling across a podcast with a CEO for a virtual assistant agency. And then I heard him on another podcast the next day, and I thought maybe I should check this out. So that's actually how I got started. I worked with an agency for like my first 2 clients. And then through my networking, I was gaining my own clients. So, one of my longest standing clients I actually had met through BNI. One of the ladies in the group had brought her to one of the visitor days.
Mhm.
And we had done a little bit of work. I think I sold them a life insurance policy. So we had done a little work together. And then she was just we were friends on Facebook and she saw this was what I was doing now. And she was like, hey, my business coach is telling me I need an assistant. This is what I need help with. Can you help? And so that was like my first client on my own. And then, uh, I essentially became an agency out of necessity. So I was still networking, working about 45 hours a week with 3 clients and doing about 5 hours a week with BNI. And the word just started to spread. This is what she's doing. And I had someone in my group reach out and say, hey, I need help. At the same time, a friend's daughter had reached out and said, hey, I want to be a virtual assistant. And boom, the agency was born, essentially. They actually were an amazing fit and still work together today. So almost 5 years later.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, that's like one of my favorite stories. But because I had put like 2 to 3 years of building a network in my community, when I made the pivot to becoming a virtual assistant and changing my business and like starting my agency, it was accepted with open arms. And I could never have imagined the growth that we would see simply from networking. I think by my second year, we had hit 6 figures. And by my third year, we had hit multi 6 figures, essentially retired my husband from his corporate career. Um, at that point, we had sold our house and bought a motorhome and just had kind of dove into a completely different life. But, when the pandemic hit, um, my husband, May 2020, along with over 1,000 people here in Oklahoma, were laid off from his corporate position. And we transitioned to virtual networking in the BNI world. When
I
we
re
sold our house,
I
we
re
moved
I
back to
remember
Norman.
yeah, I remember that because there was a long
Yeah.
time where all the BNI chapters were virtual. It was very difficult for me. I
It,
didn't
it
like
was
it.
very difficult for me too. And I love virtual networking one on one. I think one on one meetings are amazing. It can be hard to run a virtual networking meeting well, in the sense of making sure everybody has everyone's contact information and everyone's feeling included and that kind of thing. So I've seen a few groups do it since then, but it's not as common, I think, to see those virtual networking groups ran like really well. So I essentially decided to leave BNI because we had moved back to Norman. I wasn't going out to all these networking groups. I didn't feel like I could contribute the expectations. And
Mhm.
so I think I left BNI in 2021. Well, 2022 was that year that we hit multi 6 figures. And, we had at that point, we had decided my husband was not going back to a corporate career. And I hadn't actually done any in person networking in probably 2 years. And
Mhm.
because by the time I had left BNI and all of that, and it was simply the power of my network and the strength of the relationships that I had built over those years that really sustained us. And we continued to get referrals. We continued to see business growth without having to like physically be out in the community, which was great because there wasn't a lot of options at the time. It's definitely changed since then.
Hi, listeners. Are you someone who struggles to make a great first impression when you meet others? Faithann has put together her guide to help you make a great first impression no matter where you are. This quick guide gives you simple tips to leave a powerful first impression, the first step to relationship building. Go grab this free resource today by clicking on the impressions link in the show notes.
And one thing I want to repeat back to you for the listeners, I think is really important that you said was that because you had developed those relationships in BNI, when you changed, they were still there for you. That's so powerful. And were you ever in BNI as a virtual assistant, or had you already quit by the time you did that?
Yes, I was. I think they didn't actually have a virtual assistant seat at the time, so it was like a specialty seat. And I think I had that seat for because I was in BNI for like 4 years, so it was
Mhm.
probably the last year, maybe year and a half, I was in there that I had that seat.
Okay, and I should have said this a while ago, but for if you're listening for the first time, when we say BNI, we're talking about a international networking group called Business Networking International, but that's such a handful that we always just say BNI. And so that's in Oklahoma. There are several chapters, and members come and go a lot. Some there's the member of our chapter. We have founding members like 12 years that have been in, and then we still have good relationships with members even when they move on to something else. For our window cleaning business, we received a wonderful referral, and that person had to leave the group, and they're still a client today. I want people to stay in BNI. However, those relationships do stand the test of time.
Absolutely. That's a great point because I actually just last year signed two clients that I had met in BNI in the beginning. This was probably 2020 when I met them. And one of the clients signed with me, and she's like so in love with her VA. She just tells everyone how amazing it is. And so she actually convinced the other client to reach out as essentially a referral. We were familiar with each other because he was in my BNI chapter,
Hmm.
years and years and years ago. But it was like around when my business was new and we were really getting established. And he was new in business too. So the timing worked out. But just like that's a 5 year relationship, probably 6 year relationship of knowing him. And 5 years in, he makes the decision to purchase.
Right. Yeah. You would be surprised how there can be long spans of time between being in your chapter and then receiving that referral. Networking really is a long game. It
Hmm.
really is. So, your first year in a weekly industry exclusive group should really be thought of as the year to learn. Take your expectations and put them on hold and spend the year learning. And they say in BNI, I don't know if this is true in other groups, but the the return on investment only gets larger and larger the longer you're in. Like you're usually your lowest thank you for closed business that you've received is that first year because it
Hmm.
just takes a while for people to trust you. And it also depends on what kind of business you're in. So a florist can earn a referral within a month easily but a financial planner, you're going to have to really work. And so you spend that first year learning about how to do BNI, how to network, how to give, how to get to know people, how to make referrals, and then you will see the growth there. If you have that giver's gain mentality, or in another group, it's similar. It's providing opportunities for others so that you have standing to ask for opportunities when you need them. That's really the heart of it. So,
I absolutely agree. And that's one of the things I see virtual assistants, entering the market and wanting to grow their business. And one of the most common questions is, how do I get clients?
mm,
And I always say, go and network in your local community because that is going to be your your best option. And that's going to really build you that foundation that is scalable and that is going to sustain you. Those relationships are what you're looking for. And I always say, yeah, come in with a referral partner mentality, right? I want to understand your business so I can refer people to you, and then ideally you're so happy and like we have a good relationship that you want to refer people to me as well. And that is the way I've seen the biggest growth, but it is a long-term play. I'm glad you said that because it definitely takes years of establishing relationships and to like see that kind of continuous growth over time.
Right. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on before I ask you two questions that I ask every guest, you said something very cool. You said that a business coach had recommended that a client use a virtual assistant. So that is an example of a tour I just got done writing on the blog called Who's in Your Fair? So, and you'd be familiar with this concept. They call it contact spheres in BNI. I think of it as a fair. So when you go to the fair, you're not deciding, you're not going to go to the fair, have a hot dog, and go home. You're going to go to the fair, go to the hot dog, then you're going to ride the merry-go-round, then you're going to go in the fun house, and then you're going to go to the livestock. You're just going to visit each thing. So if you have a group, a specific group of people around you that your client sees before and after, then it's more likely you will receive referrals that you don't have to compete for. So in your case, that business coach who told, was it a male or a female business coach?
Female. Female.
So that business coach who told her client, it's time for you to get a virtual assistant. Well, whoever that person is on the end of that, they're not going to say, well, okay, let me go home and search 5 different virtual assistants. If that coach is saying, here, this is who you need, then the work's almost already done. And now we don't want to go home and research. Like if you're telling me that this is the person you would recommend and I already like you, then thank you. I'll just give her a call, and that's specifically business coaches should be looking for virtual assistants to network with particularly. And virtual assistants and who would be somebody you commonly give referrals to? Like what's a next step for your people? Once they've hired you, is there something that naturally progresses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, CPAs. I
See?
refer CPAs out all the time. Business coach or strategist
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense because we do a lot of the like operations and implementation, but not necessarily as much of the strategy, depending on the piece. And marketers.
Okay. So, listener, if you are a virtual assistant, take it from a very successful virtual assistant. Reach out to your marketers and your business coaches and your CPAs because that is a client journey. That is not random. Purchases do not happen in a vacuum. That's a client journey that if you could get those people around you where you're just passing those referrals around, boy, and you are going to give that client such a great experience too. It's not just about the business you receive, it's about the great experience and rapport that your client is receiving because you know the right people.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love it so much. That was one of my goals when I was in BNI was I wanted to be the person people came to for a recommendation. Like I know
Right.
all the people. That's
Mhm.
what my friends used to say. Evonne knows someone. So if
Right.
you need someone, just go to Evonne. That was my goal. Because it just gets those conversations flowing. And again, it's that giver's gain, that servant mentality, that really makes you someone that people want to do business with and want to send business to.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Yvonne, for this conversation. Now, I always ask you 2 questions. Um, so the first question is, what do you not like to see when you network?
That's a good question. So, specifically the guests not being included. So, if you are a regular to that group, whether it's a BNI or like a chamber coffee or something along those lines, if you're a regular and you know most people and then you see somebody come in, go greet them, go talk to them, make them feel welcome. You never know if they're going to be your ideal client or referral partner, but two, that makes the networking feel less daunting, especially a lot of those people that don't automatically just like flow with the crowd. They're probably pretty nervous. And if you
Right.
can kind of put them at ease, it's going to put a really good taste in their mouth and they're going to want to come back, but then you'll also have a really great opportunity to build a relationship with them too.
Excellent. What do you like to see when you network?
I mean, it's like the other side of that coin, right?
Yeah,
Like I
right.
like to see that that openness and just like the whole group like bringing someone in and making them feel welcome. It's that it's the feeling you get when you come in, especially with in person, like that welcome feel and that welcome energy. That's what I really like to see. um, Virtually, I really like to see when you give out a contact list to everyone and you ask for the visitor to add their contact information to the chat.
That's good. I hadn't thought of that. That's a nice perspective. Yeah. That would make a visitor feel really welcome if they're invited to put their contact information in the chat. Well, thank you so
Absolutely.
much. Yeah,
You're
I'm
welcome.
so proud of what you've built, and we need to have a one-to-one. We haven't yet. We should. So we'll see each
Absolutely.
other again at the next OKC Women in Business coffee. Listeners, if you are part of a regular group, take Evonne's advice and look for the new person and walk up to them and make them feel welcome, because you're going to build your own credibility when you do that, and you're going to make that person feel so welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the Networkers Tour Guide podcast, Evonne.
Thanks, Faithann. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Networkers Tour Guide podcast with Faithann Basor. Share this episode with a friend and be sure to come back next week for more networking tips and tricks from the Networkers Tour Guide.